In this video, we are going to do some 3D modeling with walls and doors and windows available to us in the Vectorworks program, as well as a few other little tips and tricks that I have picked up in creating a traditional box set type design. And we'll follow that up with how I take those individual elements into Photoshop to create paint elevations. So I'm going to start. I don't have a particular play in mind for this. I just want to do some basic drawing as far as a box set might be. In real life, I would be much more careful with dimensions and placement of things, and I'd have an understanding more of where doors and windows and things like that might be necessary. But for this, we're just going to go through some of the tools, how they work, and show you how to take those into a place where they can be created for paint elevations here. So I'm using the wall tool in this particular example, and I'm on my extruded layer. This is a layer that I've created myself. It is intended to be three-dimensional, and I've already created a three-dimensional model of the building here. So if I look at this and go to, for example, a front view, you can see that the walls and whatnot are built into that. If I change that into a perspective view and use some of the tools to walk around in that environment, you can see theater walls, the floor, there's even the pit is built into that. This is all stuff that I've created myself for this particular theater, the Koger Theater. All right, so I'm going to go back to a top view. And again, I'm just using the wall tool that's given in Vectorworks. Now you can do some modifications to the wall tool. If you click on the little wrench pencil button that suggests preferences that you can change. You can change the thickness of the wall. This is usually where I go in, and because our walls for theater are typically Hollywood style flats that are made with 1x3 plus a sheet of Luan, that makes them 2 3/4 of an inch thick. So I go ahead and change my overall thickness for that to 2 3/4 so that it is going to be appropriate to what we would build for the stage. So once I've got that set, then it's just a matter of choosing the appropriate setting here, which direction you want to build your lines. At this point, it doesn't matter a lot for that. I do want to be able to do a polygon mode because I'm creating irregular walls. This isn't for architecture where many things are squares. So I'm just going to start kind of over here. Again, I'm not worried about sight lines at this point. I just want to throw some things in here and see what we can come up with. And once I've got my shape that I like, I double click and it sets those walls into place. So at this point, I should be able to individually select walls, which is nice at this point. We'll be able to adjust them later. It does not keep them connected, but if we zoom in on that, we can see that they're drawn as though they're connected, which for us right now is fine. All right, so next I'm going to take a door, and I'm going to place a door in here. Now the nice thing about Vectorworks is it will place, if you use the wall tool, it will automatically put the doors and windows within the structure itself. And then I just have to decide which direction I want it to swing, and I can get that just by changing the position of my cursor. So I think for this one, I wanted to open out in this direction. Now this is where it gets a little bit tricky because we don't want the door to be sticking out from the wall in general. So you can see when it places it in the center of the wall, and because our walls are drawn at 2.75, and the reveal of the wall is thicker than that, we need to make some modifications. So what I will usually do is take the tape measure, and I need to measure exactly how far out it is sticking from the wall. So it's 7/8. So 7/8 is an important measurement at this point. Then I'm going to go into the settings for the wall, for the window, and there is this offset in wall preference here. So I'm going to change that. I think it's positive 7/8. We'll see if it goes to the right spot. There it is. So for our drafting purposes, we want that wall to be inset into the wall. So if I change that offset to that measurement that I took, 7/8, we get the wall placed in the proper position. At this point, I can check my measurements. I look at I can change the width of the door that I want. So maybe that's better to be 2'6". I can change there. I could change the height. Standard height is 6'8". So unless you're doing something that's, you want your doors to be higher or lower than standard for a particular reason, you usually just leave that alone. We'll come back to the shape. We're going to go down to the door jamb. This is the reveal. This is where you can change the reveal to be something thicker, again depending on the architecture you're trying to emulate. Let's try 6 inches. Now see, by changing that, it's made this in a position farther than what it was before, so I would have to go back in and adjust that offset again since I've changed that jamb depth there. Next, I want to make sure I include trim, and it's the interior trim. Exterior trim is going to put the trim on this side. Sometimes if I had made the door swing into the space, I'd have to choose exterior trim. It really just has to do with what side of the door jamb it's adding that trim to. So sometimes you just have to kind of try it and figure out which one is going to work the best. Some of these other details will change later, but let's go in and measure this again. So now that's 3/4. So if I go back into my settings, I've already got it offset by 7/8, but now I need to add 3/4. So the simplest way of doing this without having to do math in my head is to type in plus 3/4, and let's see what happens. There it goes. So Vectorworks does the math for you. You don't have to think about it. It's pretty great. That's true for almost any situation where you are changing the dimension for something. You can always just add, like if I want to make this 3 feet again and add 6 inches, I can just type in +6 and it automatically makes it 3 feet. So always use that to your advantage where you want it. So let's go back into the settings so we can visualize this door a little bit better. So right now we just have a plain square door, which is fine. You can change that to different shapes, different heights. If you do that while you're in the settings, you can you don't have to go back and forth. It gives you a little preview of what that's going to look like, which is nice. And so you can pick, there's only a few options, so you have to kind of decide whether those options are appropriate, and if you don't like any of them, then you're going to have to go about creating your own door. But for now, we're not going to worry about that. You can also change how it swings. So an opening is literally just going to be like an archway with no door. Cased opening is going to give us that reveal. Right now it's just a simple swing. You got bipart, slider doors, all different things. We're going to keep it simple. And we've already checked the jamb depth, so we've changed that to 6 inches. The width of that, 3/4 of an inch, is pretty standard. When we're going to use 1x or plywood or something like that for our reveal, so we'll keep that at 3/4 of an inch. Again, I like to design and do the drawings based on what it's going to be in real life. So if I can change any of those dimensions to make that more appropriate, I'm going to do that. The leaf just has to do with what the overall look of that is. So the glass leaf is going to give us a glass panel in the middle. You can change any of these details in here, and it's going to give you different options for that. So you can change, if I want that to be 6 inches, I can change that pretty easily. So you can pretty much design the doors to be exactly what you want them to be if they're going to be built from scratch. If you're purchasing doors, or if you're trying to emulate something from a stock door, you can usually just make a note that say this door is stock. But if you know it's going to be built from scratch, you can go in and change all of these settings. So a panel door just means it's going to be solid, but it's going to have some panels built into it. Again, you can change any of these sections. You can make 3 panels. You can change the heights of any of those things, and so on and so forth. We'll just leave it like that. There are some custom doors that you can choose from. Many different styles, different offerings. And again, you're limited by what they have in here, but you can always, there are ways to adjust them after the fact, which we're not going to get into right now. So I'm just going to go back to this panel model that we've got. Lights include, if you have windows on either side. I think we'll not include those this time. Threshold is just the bit that goes between the walls on the floor. Most of the time we don't have thresholds for our theater, so we're going to leave that out. If this was going to be a shuttered window, you can add louvers. The transom can be included, and it's not giving me the option to include a transom. I'm not totally sure why that is, but in any case, we've already turned on our trim. Lintel is going to be an added decorative piece above the top there. And you can include all of the hardware and whatnot for the door and choose a style of hardware. So again, most of these are based on architecture and things that you can purchase in real life. I don't think we'll need a kick plate. So, you can play with a lot of those settings and create a very custom wall to be whatever your desire is for that, whatever suits your design. All right, so if I back this out, go to a front view, so there's my door, and even includes my little handle, and I'm good to go. All right, let's see. Let's add a nice big picture window in this wall here. So same idea. I'm going to go in and once that wall is highlighted, I can click on that and just to think for a second. And so there it is. And again, I'm going to go to a front view so you can see that. So there's that little window. You have very similar settings to be able to change your window to the doors. Very similar things here. So I can add a transom. Maybe I'll add a transom for this one. This one is styled as a casement window. Let's change it to picture window slider. I like this. And then my width, I'm going to make this much wider, so let's make it 8 foot. I'm not sure if that fits in my wall, but we'll find out. Elevation in the wall. So this just puts the height of this at 6'8", so it's the same height as your door. That's pretty standard in a house, that the height of the windows is the height of the door. Not always, but that is what the default is for here. I'm going to show you how we can change the height of it later. Let's make it 6 foot tall. All right, so you can see that that has placed this window, and it's not very far from the floor, is it? So to me, that looks a little bit odd considering our person standing here, their head is at this position. So I'm going to move this higher in the wall. So if I do look over here, just got to find the right setting. There it is. So where it says height here, if I change that number from the 0 that it was, it's going to adjust that height. And what measurement does that take that off of? Really, it's just measuring from the height of that to the floor is still 6'8". So I could also probably change this number. So it works. So a couple different ways to put that in a different position there. Now once it's set, if I go back to my top view, you can change the position of it. So again, one of the nice things about the using the wall units, you can change even after the fact, and it's going to just fix that for you. So let's go back to a front view, and let's do an OpenGL rendering just so we can see if this is working. Let's get a nice symmetric view. There we go. It was the wall was blending in with the background because my so you can see that the wall is already has the window inserted. It's already cut out of the wall so that it can be seen through from there. All right, I think that will hopefully cover the idea of inserting doors and windows. Again, if we were to put something on one of these angled walls, same idea as far as placement. Once you've picked your position, it will usually do most of the work for you as far as the placement. You just have to go back in and check its position in the wall. Speaking of, we need to fix that on this window here. So first of all, let's add some trim, because it's very rare when we have a window that doesn't have some sort of molding around it. So there's some interior trim. Let's make our jamb similar to our door. And again, we can kind of zoom in here, get this measurement. 1 5/8 is my offset. If it's that measurement or not. It is. So plan wall offset 1 5/8. Now it's flush up against the wall like it would be if we were building this in real life. Okay, next I want to show you how to add molding, like a crown molding or cornice molding, depending on what you call it, that would travel the distance from one end of our room to the other. Now this is a trick that I learned well, a little while ago, I suppose, but it involves creating a where is it? Extrude along path. This tool right here. You've probably done extrude, you've probably done some of these other things. Maybe you haven't done extrude along path yet, so let me show you how that works. So it starts with a shape. So we can start with the shape of our cornice, and I'm going to zoom in so I can draw it at an appropriate size. So cornice molding, it's a good size cornice molding. So I'm going to make it 6 inches tall. And it's going to stick out, 5 1/4 is good. Again, I am doing this fairly quickly so that we don't take up a whole lot of time, but creating some sort of cornice. You can also consider you're building it out of materials you have on hand, or maybe you can even actually download profiles from places like the Home Depot website. You can actually download the profile from that and create a shape using that if you know you're going to purchase the molding to be able to just, you don't have to create it or build it yourself, which is nice. And I think I'm going to make this a regular number. So rather than being 5 1/4, I'm just going to make it 5 inches wide. So I have a very definite center. So I need to be able to know the center dimension of this. So if this is 5 inches wide, that means my middle is at 2.5 inches. So I'm going to remember that for the moment. Next, I'm going to take my polygon tool and essentially trace the outline of the walls here. I'm just going to take each one, clicking at each corner. It's really important that you actually click on the corners, so double check to make sure that you're actually clicking on that, because if you're not, it's going to cause problems later on. And then double click to set that shape. So from here now, because the extrude along path works by creating that shape as kind of like a big long tube based on the shape you give them, but it does that through the middle of the object. So remember how we said it's 5 inches wide, the center of that is 2.5. So I need to offset this polygon from the wall by 2.5 inches. So I'm going to use this offset tool, and then I don't want to maintain the original line. I just want the resulting line. Click on the inside of that shape so it offsets that polygon from the wall by 2.5 inches. Oh, except I didn't change it to 2.5 inches. So let me go back, undo a couple of times, change that to 2.5, and then offset it. So now it's where it needs to be. Then I just need to find my little shape. Incidentally, if you didn't know, if you hold the B key down, you will see through objects. So right now this polygon is set as a solid. It doesn't really matter for what we're doing, but I lost my little shape, so I need to click on that, move it out so I can actually see it. All right, so at this point, we select the shape we made for the profile of our cornice. We select the path that it's going to follow, and we choose this tool, Extrude Along Path. It's going to ask you what should be the path, and it's highlighted my profile, which I don't want, so I need to change that to the actual path here. And when I say OK, it creates that molding. Now this is where it gets a little bit tricky. Sometimes it's going to put the shape in an odd position and you just have to go back and reset it. But if I do a quick isometric view of this, use my fly around tool, I can see that it made that profile appropriately. Problem is, it's in the floor. So the easiest way to fix that is to go to a front view, zoom out a little bit, and I need to place it on top of my wall here. So I'm just going to use my Move by Points tool, find a point along the top edge. Make sure I hold down the shift key so that it does that at a 90-degree angle. I don't want to accidentally put it in at, you can see where it says A, 89.77. That would be a problem because it would not line up properly with my walls. So then I can move that there. Also, incidentally, you can change the height of these walls pretty easily. Easier to do before you actually create them. But if we go and select these walls individually, you can change the height of the walls to be, you know, whatever you want them to be in there. At this point, you can also change them individually if you want some to be higher than the others, so on and so forth. If some are higher, it changes how this extrude along path works a little bit, but hopefully you get the idea. So since I added 2 feet in height, I need to move my cornice up 2 feet. So I can go to my Z height here and just do plus 2 feet. And voila, it is in the right spot. I could have also used the move command, some other different options, but that was the easiest thing to do at the moment. All right, so now I have a piece of cornice. You can do the same thing if you wanted to create a baseboard along here. The only difference is you would have to stop it at your doors, and if you had any platforms or steps or anything like that built into it, you'd have to deal with that as well. All right, so I'm going to take, let me go back to a top view. So from this point, I've done all of my modeling on the wall. I've added, I've added this trim. There's trim and molding around the windows. If you were going to do any kind of panel molding, you can either do that in the model or you can do it later on two-dimensionally in an elevation and use that. So I think for right now, I'm just going to leave it like this. And I'm going to choose this wall with the door in it for my paint elevation. So I'm going to go back to my top view. So at this point, I'm separating out the individual walls and I would normally place each individual wall on its own design layer. So I would have wall A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. Label them alphabetically, usually stage right to stage left. So for this one, I want to choose the wall and make sure I have the door selected. So if I select the door, or the door itself, it automatically selects the wall with it. And I also need to select this cornice molding that I have here. This object can't be selected if an in-wall object is selected. So I wonder what happens if we choose the door. So if we choose the wall by itself, well, I'm not going to take any chances. I want to choose the door. All right, so from here, I want to duplicate, so Command D, or if you go up under Edit, Duplicate is right here. And I'm going to then go to my, oh, I lied. Okay, I am going to select the wall and probably need to delete that duplicate of that door. So let's try selecting the wall, and then since I can, I'm going to go ahead and select the cornice molding, and I'm going to duplicate these, and we're going to see what happens. So from here, I want to create a new layer, new design layer, and I'm going to call it Wall C, since that's the order it would be in. And it's going to ask me some details. I want it to be 1/2 inch scale. That is probably all I need for right now. And you can see over here in our navigation that it has created a new design layer for Wall C. So let's go to that layer and see what we got. All right, well, it looks like it worked. Looks like it brought the door along with it anyways. So again, if I go to a front view, so there's my door, there's my wall, and my cornice. Now you'll notice that the cornice is, the whole cornice, because we created that as one single solid object. For our purposes, we don't need all of this extra stuff, so I'm going to create some shapes to be able to subtract away the excess cornice that I don't need. So I'm going to use the polygon tool, and at this point I just need to click a point outside of there, follow the angle that is made between the two pieces of cornice, and just make a shape that completely encompasses that section of cornice I'm going to get rid of. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. Again, follow the angle, click each time, make the shape encompass the entire piece. Then if I select both of those pieces together, I can extrude them. And since I know this cornice is at 12 feet, I'm going to make this extrusion 14 feet, just so I know for sure that it is going to intersect completely with that piece of cornice. So there we go. So from here then, I choose my cornice, I choose those two objects that I created. If you extrude them both at the same time, it creates one single object. Makes this process a little easier. And if I right click on this, I can go down to subtract solids. I am subtracting from this shape, so I don't need to change any of the layers here. If the wall had highlighted, I would need to change it because I want to subtract away this cornice. So I say OK, and I am left with just the wall and the cornice. So when I'm creating elevations, this is my process. So if I've have any other details or things on there that I've done in the 3D model, I just want to make sure I retain those, bring them into the design layer for that individual wall, cut away the shapes and things that I don't need anymore, and then I'm left with just the details from the wall itself.